did have some fights this past weekend, and we'll get to those later in the pod, but I feel like the place that we just have to start is with this super stacked pay-per-view this weekend, UFC 299 in the 305, and I'm so excited for this because, I mean, the main event, we can honestly just hop right in with that. Sean O'Malley will be going for his first title defense at bantamweight against the only man to ever beat him, Marlon Chito Vera, and this fight is interesting for a lot of reasons, not just because of like the history between them. Obviously, they fought back at UFC 252, and Chito won with that crazy just leg kick that got Sean in the peroneal nerve. But I watched that fight like again before this, and really before the leg kick, O'Malley was kind of dominating that fight on the feet. He was picking Chito apart, and he kind of was doing what he does to everyone in there. And I think that in a way, he almost has to replicate that performance, which is crazy to say when it was a loss, but up until that one shot, and that shot, I don't like saying the word fluke because obviously it was a coordinated effort, but at the same time, he hit him in the perfect spot behind the knee, and that does mean something, but if O'Malley can kind of just pick him apart from range and not get backed up against the cage against someone like Chito, who's obviously has crazy knockout power and has improved so much since the first fight with O'Malley, I think that it could be an interesting fight. So, like I said, I think O'Malley just needs to use his footwork, some good feints, and if Chito kind of comes to him, that could benefit him a lot, because of the style that he has. But what do you think of this fight?
So yeah, we finally get the first title defense for Sean O'Malley, and it comes in by way of a rematch because Chito's still the fifth ranked contender in the division. So it's not every day that you obviously see number 5 going to face the champion. So there's obviously bad blood to be settled, and it will be, and that's all you can really ask for pretty much. Like, these two have only gotten better since their last meeting, and now they get to main event pay-per-view. Last pay-per-view, it's gonna send us into UFC 300, and these two are gonna do it in fireworks fashion. So I'm excited.
So am I, man. I think that the O'Malley hype will be crazy in Miami because that's just a fun city. O'Malley's a fun fighter, and just even like I said, stylistically, it's just so amazing to think about because of O'Malley's elusiveness. Even in the first fight, he showed that elusiveness, except with that one kick. But I think that could make it really interesting. But Chito, man, we talk about this all the time, how much better he gets in between fights, and you really wonder what his game plan is going to be because if he can walk Sean O'Malley down, he has crazy power, and we've seen him finish elusive fighters before. I thought of the Cruz fight, obviously, caught him with that head kick as he was leaning away. That's something that could happen in this fight, and it's not a detriment to O'Malley. It's just or an insult to O'Malley, I should say.
It's worth noting too that this obviously isn't in the Apex, so you got the size difference with the cage, so that should play more into Sean O'Malley's favor. But
for sure, he just can't back up in a straight line. I think if he circles out and kind of really picks his shots, I think this fight honestly could be a little bit of like a chess match, especially in the early rounds. I don't think Vera should really just go right after him because that's kind of what Aljamain Sterling tried to do, and it really, like you said, plays into O'Malley's style in terms of like the counter striking. And if this fight looks like the first couple minutes of their first fight, O'Malley's probably going to end up getting the win. But Chito is one of those guys who really can finish it at any moment in any way, whether it be on the feet or on the ground. And I love this fight. It's so interesting with the history and everything. I love it.
Aljo too had some thoughts, about this fight, talking about how Chito hasn't had a great camp, and I don't know if that's only because he wants that Sean O'Malley rematch, but I hope not. I mean, both guys once again have clearly come a long way since their last meeting, and it's not like this fight is just because that first one went the way it did. Both guys are obviously more than deserving of this kind of spotlight. So, all that's left to do is wait and see. But that was interesting. I thought.
Yeah,
I hope to bring up.
I mean, when I think about that, Aljo really doesn't have a reason to make something like that up, because you were talking about maybe he wants the rematch, but at the same time, he said he's not coming back down to 35. So the only way that I can
True.
see it happening
Yeah.
is if he gets the belt at 45 and then O'Malley goes up in the future. But in either way, I don't think that would really the outcome of this fight wouldn't really impact that in the future, especially if O'Malley would end up going to 45 anyway. But I just think, I don't know, Chito, he's deserving. But at the same time, when you have Marab and Corey Sandhagen there, who probably
Yeah.
should have been the first two choices, it's a little tough. But at the same time, with the history behind this fight, I definitely get it. And either way, honestly, I think it's pretty interesting for the UFC, because Sean O'Malley is already one of their biggest stars. But Chito, a lot of people love Chito, man. Like, he's such like a chill, like down to earth guy, and he works hard, and like really, I feel like a lot of like the blue collar like part of the fan base loves Chito. And for me, I like both of these guys. It's gonna be hard to see either of them lose. That's kind of how I felt the first time they fought. But this fight has some stakes behind it. Their first fight really, it left you wanting more, because it felt like there was more that was going to happen, and it's just unfinished business, and hopefully that business gets finished in Miami. But to move on to the co-main event, we got Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis, and that is a crazy fight to get booked. I would imagine they paid Dustin Poirier handsomely to take this risk against a guy who's ranked so far below him and doesn't really have the name that he has yet. But at the same time, this is a good fight and a good test for Saint-Denis, because he's, a trained killer, French special ops. Like, this dude is a savage.
Yeah, I had no idea about that until I found out in our outline. But yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, this dude started training MMA because he wanted to be a better soldier. Like, this dude is coming to kill. And, like, you got to respect that, especially when you're a fight fan like us and you really, like, just love the violence of it. That's going to be fun. But Dustin Poirier, he's a dog, and he always has been, because when you think about it, he's never lost two straight fights. He's coming off a loss. Could this be the first time? I don't really know, because Saint-Denis, it's so weird. He's so talented all around, and, like, when you really think about it, he's the favorite in this fight too, which is wild to think about. But he's so good all around. And Dustin Poirier, you're like, man, are people really counting him out? But I don't know if you really can, because when he gets into those dog fights, man, just straight up wars, there's not a lot of people who can hang with him. But this guy in particular, I think he has the mentality to hang with him. But we're gonna have to see if he has the skills to hang with him in a slugfest, which I honestly think this fight will be. But what do you think? I guess, like, what are your early thoughts on this fight, really?
yeah, I think part of why Dustin wanted this fight, because I think something had to do with it being in Miami, and that's close to where he trains and whatnot. So I'm sure he's gotten a really good camp in and whatnot. Obviously at first there was the scary thing about this fight, getting called off, but luckily it's back on, and I think these two just bring such a unique like blend between each other's styles that can just really, you really don't have a clear vision, I guess, of how the fight's gonna go. It's really just about who's gonna cut off the cage from the other, and just pretty much just make it hell for the other guy in there. And obviously, Dustin Poirier being the household name in this bout, Benoit Saint-Denis, like, he definitely has all the makings of being able to just keep a guy just completely away from what he's comfortable in doing, and his strengths. I think back to the Matt Frivola fight, for instance. Thought that was definitely like the first, for me at least, like the first showing that like really opened up my eyes to what this guy can bring. So yeah, I think it's definitely one of the more I would say slept on co-mains that we might get this year. But obviously, everyone, one way or the other, when they see the diamond on the card, everyone gets up for it. So
Yeah, I mean, when you think about this fight, and I'm looking it up just to make sure that I'm not wrong, but I believe that Saint-Denis' only loss to isn't even at lightweight, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be wrong about that. But either way, it was back in like 2021. Why can't I find it though? I'm on the card. Unless I'm just... Yeah, it was at welterweight, his only loss. So he's literally never lost at this weight class, and now he's fighting Dustin Poirier, former interim champion. You really just got to wonder what's going to happen when the two of these guys get to the center of the octagon and just start trading, because even if Denis tries to take him down, Poirier's got like a sneaky good jiu-jitsu game. He's got great guillotines. He's good at getting up. You know, people kind of sleep on that because of the Khabib fight and the Charles Oliveira fight, but you got to realize those two dudes on the ground are...
Yeah, I mean, two literal former champions, so...
Exactly. Denis is going to have his hands full in this fight, but so is Dustin Poirier. He can't... Neither of them can really sleep on each other. Like, Denis just can't think that this is going to be a quick ascent to the top, or maybe he does, which would be interesting if it is. But Dustin Poirier, too, I mean, he's going in there, like I said, against a legit trained killer. And I think that both of these guys should really try to drag each other into deep water and really see who comes out on top, because I think that in terms of the skills, this fight is pretty even. So I'm very intrigued to see how Denis does, because you know the UFC has to believe in him to put him up against a guy like Poirier, who's such a big star. But we'll move on to the fight before that, which is another really interesting one, but this one at welterweight. Kevin Holland versus Michael Venom Page, and he's welcoming MVP to the UFC, obviously. MVP, for those who don't know, was in Bellator for a long time. Only really lost to the best fighters in Bellator. Great striker. Honestly, for people who are just UFC fans, think about Wonder Boy. That's probably the closest comparison you could make. But MVP has some crazy knockout power, but so does Kevin Holland, coming in, obviously, from being a former 185er going down to 170. You know that this is kind of like the last fight that we talked about, in the sense that these two guys can stand and bang, and we really got to hope that they do, because I think it's going to be interesting. Kevin Holland, when he fought Wonder Boy, he kind of like went into that with like reckless abandon, like just going in there and trying to outstrike this legendary striker. So you have to wonder if he's going to try that again versus MVP. I feel like he won't. He'll try to mix it up a little more, make it dirty. But MVP, man, if this fight's on the feet, it's hard to pick against him. And I love that he's finally in the UFC. The biggest criticism of MVP throughout his career was that he wasn't fighting the top class opponents. Well, now he's in the UFC, getting immediately into the welterweight rankings. If he can win this fight, I think you have to give him a top guy next. So what do you think of this one off the top of your head, man?
Well, I want to ask you something real quick first. Do you think that this is a good or appropriate sort of stepping stone for MVP, or that he could already be facing someone in the top 5? Kind of like, well, not like really Chandler? Like Michael Chandler. Yeah, but yeah, something like that.
I mean, it's definitely, like, if they would have booked him against, like, let's look at the rankings real quick at welterweight. I'll look to see who's, like, in the top 5. So, like, let's say they put him against... we're going to talk about Gilbert Burns. Imagine they put him up against him. Like, I wouldn't be mad at that. But at the same time, welterweight is so stacked, especially in the top 15. There's so many high-level fighters, and Holland's ranked 13. I think that it's honestly a decent entry, because Holland is a bigger name at welterweight, despite the maybe lower part of the rankings. But I don't know. It's kind of interesting, because MVP... I mean, it's kind of true. In Bellator, he just didn't really have an opportunity to fight like the highest class of opponents. So I think that Kevin Holland, it's a good start, and it's a fun matchup, because Kevin's going to talk and he's going to make it interesting. And MVP, he's another guy who's really good at marketing himself. He likes to talk a little bit too. So I feel like this could be one of those fights that we see these guys jaw on a little bit in the cage. I really hope so. But I feel like we're going to see Kevin Holland come forward a lot, and MVP is going to be kind of trying to counter, like most of those like karate type strikers do. He's like I said, he's a lot like Wonder Boy, but I think he has a lot more power than Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy might be a little bit faster, but like what MVP lacks in the speed, he has in power. So it's really interesting. Kevin Holland's a tough dude, man. We don't really see him get like dropped bad often, you know what I'm saying? Like even against Wonder Boy, it was kind of just more like the toll after a while that ended that fight. But I'm so intrigued. Like I said, I'm so glad that MVP is in the UFC now, and now people who doubt him can either be proven right or proven wrong. MVP is kind of in charge of that, or Kevin Holland might be. Yeah. But to move on to another welterweight fights on this card. A lot of big tests on this card for up-and-coming prospects because we got Della Maddelena versus Gilbert Burns, and I don't even know if, like, I might be more excited for this fight than I am for the last one because MVP, I'm stoked that he's in the UFC, but stylistically, Gilbert Burns and JDM, they come to fight. Like, there's not going to be, like, one guy's going to sit back and hope to counter. Like, these two dudes are going to go to the center of the octagon and start trading. Now, Jack obviously has to hope that Gilbert doesn't want to take it to the ground, but he does have pretty solid takedown defense, so I feel like this fight will take place mostly on the feet, and I just think it's going to be a war. I really think this card has some crazy potential if all of these fights go the way we think they might go. And they're all so even, honestly. Like, none of them, I don't look at any of them and really think to myself, oh yeah, this person is going to win. Or like, this person has better odds at winning. It really feels like a lot of these fights are just pick'ems when you think about them. And this one, honestly, might be the closest one of them all because their boxing styles are honestly fairly similar. Gilbert can be like a composed boxer, but he kind of like tends to brawl a little more. And that could throw JDM off. Who knows? But because if you remember JDM's last win wasn't really like as impressive as we're used to seeing him. And I know it was like I think his opponent came in on short notice, so it was kind of like a different type of style. But at the same time, he's fighting Gilbert Burns, who's a killer, and he's a killer everywhere. So what do you think? Do you think this fight is going to stay on the feet for most of it?
Yeah, for the sake of, having like a legit fight of the year candidate, like I would definitely think that this is gonna stay on the feet for the majority. And it's really gonna come down to whether or not JDM is gonna be able to like overwhelm Gilbert Burns with how powerful like those punches are. I feel like at this point in time, like Gilbert is more technically sound and whatnot, and like he's obviously no stranger to if he needs to slow things down and just play things more methodical and just keep a guy somewhere on the ground. Like he's obviously more than capable of doing that. But I think you mentioned how Gilbert does come to brawl. Feel like I don't know if that's something that JDM could welcome. And I guess it's all about whether or not I think the back foot is definitely going to prove to be pivotal for someone like JDM in a fight like this. If he's able to, keep that jab out, keep flicking it and whatnot, and piece Gilbert up that way, I think he could win by points like relatively easily. But yeah, you definitely can't let Gilbert, pretty much just control the center and then just get you up against the cage and. Because I feel like in any clinch situation, like it's going to be all Gilbert Burns. So there's a lot of ways that this fight can go, but I think we all definitely want to see them both slug it out on the feet and create like an absolute spectacle that way.
I think it's going to happen that way. I honestly believe the outcome of this fight will depend on how composed Gilbert Burns will be coming forward, because I do think JDM can kind of piece him up kind of on the back foot like you were saying. But it really depends on Gilbert, because if Gilbert comes in more composed, tries to use his experience, drag Jack into deep water, I think that could be very good for him.
Yeah,
but at the same time, if he comes in recklessly, he could get knocked out.
Yeah, with the JDM too, like he's obviously had plenty of quick finishes so far in his career. So it will be interesting to see if this does go the distance, and especially with obviously a top contender like Gilbert Burns. Where the cardio is gonna be at the end of the fight. So
it's funny, you were talking about if Kevin Holland was the perfect step for MVP. I think if MVP beats Kevin Holland, him versus the winner of this fight would actually be a really fun matchup. Either way, I think if it's Gilbert, fans might be a little more excited just because he's more of like a household name, but JDM is a bad dude, man. So I don't know. I think that could definitely be a thing. Welterweight it's pretty fun right now. It seems like the contenders are fighting a little more than we're used to. So let's hope that maybe we get some shakeups and things get a little more interesting at the top. But the last fight on the main card that we could talk about is Petr Yan versus Song Yadong. And it's crazy to think that Petr Yan is on a 3-fight losing streak and has lost 4 out of his last 5. But he's only lost to the best. All people who are in the title conversation or have been or are champion. So Aljamain Sterling, Sean O'Malley, Merab, those are the 3 losses. So it's kind of like how can you really say that Petr, like, 'cause some people are saying, oh, Petr might be washed, but I don't know about that. Because when you're only losing to the best, I don't really think you can really hold that against him fully. And, like, I'm looking at his Tapology now. His last win was 2021, which is wild to think about, against Corey Sandhagen, who is obviously another top contender at bantamweight. So we know he can beat top guys. And Song Yadong probably wants to take that, higher step in the rankings and maybe get another huge win under his belt. But I think that this one, like all the other fights, man, it's going to be a war. Like, all these fights are good strikers who come forward and come to fight. And it's not like guys who are trying to, like, point fight or just win on the scorecards. Like, all these people come in to finish the other guy. And I know that that's, like, what everyone really wants to do in MMA, but maybe not everybody tries to center their game plan around how I'm going to finish him, but more so how I'm going to beat him. And I think that Song Yadong is going to come into this fight hungry. He has such crazy power at bantamweight. I think that that's, like, something that Petr Yan has to look out for. I mean, we've seen him against O'Malley and Sandhagen kind of get rocked on the feet sometimes if he gets hit. Even against Jose Aldo, if you're thinking, like, way back. But I do think he has the skill set to win this fight. He's so good all around, and he's very technical. When you think about good Muay Thai fighters, like, in particular, like, that style of striking, Petr Yan is one of those top names on that list, if you ask me. So I think that if he can keep maybe, like, a further range, because Song wants it in boxing range. I think Petr can do well at, like, kickboxing range, just a little bit further. And I think that if he can kind of pick him apart from that range, he could win this fight. But if this fight becomes a brawl, that's where all hell breaks loose. Kind of like the rest of the main card when you think about it. But what do you think of this matchup, bantamweight?
Yeah, I don't think it's anything to do with Petr Yan showing any signs of being washed or anything like that. I think it's just tough. Like, when you're as dominant of a champion as he was, and you lose your title by disqualification, like.
Wait, can I cut? Isn't it funny? Like, you say dominant, and I know what you mean because it's like the skill set, but he didn't have a title defense. That was his first title defense, if you remember. Like, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that is.
I remember when he beat Aldo,
wow.
We were all talking about how long is this guy going to hold the belt. And then, like, once that thing happened with Aljo in a fight that he was winning, even Aljo admits that was a fight that Petr Yan was winning.
That's crazy.
It's just crazy how that altered the timeline. You wonder what would be happening right now at 135 if that weird disqualification never happened. But back to what you were saying, obviously. I think,
dude, it's just like exactly when your career path pretty much gets, like, swerved like that in a way. Like, it's pretty tough to get back there and just obviously get to that belt again. So you said it perfectly. Like, he's been facing the top guys, and he's taking them to the limit. It's just okay, like, his hand's not getting raised in the end. It happens. And this fight, obviously, I see no different with a guy like Song Yadong, who I feel like I've been watching for a while now, and has definitely more than proved him his worth in being able to get a fight like this. The closer and closer he gets to the title, he doesn't look like a guy who packs a powerful punch, but he really does, and that obviously a lot of fans gravitate towards, and obviously UFC sees that it's been treating him good with good results and whatnot. So this is just you can't really start the card off with, like, a better way to pretty much. I think this is obviously really going to set the tone for the entire main card, and I think it's going to be super like razor thin close. Like, obviously you don't want to freaking bring up any sort of, like, robbery dispute or anything, but there could be a lot of.
We should wait till after the fight for that. Let's not even speak that into existence. I don't want to think about that right now. We've had so many of those, like,
this could be one of those
cards.
ones where a lot of people are up in arms about the decision, but hopefully we just get a clear finish, a clear winner anyways, and then we're not even talking about that. But once again, obviously both guys are here to bring it, and they definitely deserve this fight. So
I think Piotr's going to kind of put his foot on the gas pedal a little more when it comes to this fight, because the O'Malley fight was his first 3-rounder in a while, and it seemed like he took a while to get going in that fight. But now that he's had that 3-round fight again under his belt, and it kind of cost him in the end that he didn't put his foot on the gas pedal right off the bat. Now he fights Song Yadong. I think that this is the time when he might really just be there from the opening bell. But I think he has to be to win this fight. So it'll be really interesting to start the card off with that. I agree with you. I think it'll be a good way to set the tone for the night that follows it. But even besides that, man, the prelims. So I'm going to list a few fights, and you tell me which one you're looking forward to the most, all right? So we got, I think I'm going to go from the top down, kind of like we do with the main card. So Curtis Blaydes versus Jailton Almeida. Crazy to think that's on the prelims. Caitlin Sermonera, I guess she got married. Chukagian, same person. Yeah. She's fighting Macy Barber, and Macy's been on a crazy rise at 125, so that should be interesting. Gamrot versus RDA at 155. That's going to be nuts. I can't believe that these fights I'm reading are on the prelims. I mean, this could be like a whole fight night card at the Apex. But and then Pedro Munoz versus Kyler Phillips. I think that one will be a really fun scrap at 135 between two guys who are going to get after it. But of those fights, which one are you most excited for?
I think I'm going to go with Almeida and Curtis Blaydes as the one that I'm most excited for. But the one that that's probably the most left on that shouldn't be would be the Kyler Phillips and it's
Pedro Munoz.
Yeah, Kyler Phillips versus Pedro Munoz. Those two right there feel like are absolute. They're once again, like, they are capable of being put on the main card, and here they are on the prelims. But really, like, all four, to be honest, are like super. Like, I think these are all great fights, but I think at least for the Curtis Blaydes Jailton Almeida fight, like a fight that was already supposed to happen and now is finally happening. I think that obviously, like, it's gonna, especially for someone like Jailton Almeida who's been on this rise, and Curtis Blaydes obviously wants to stay in this upper echelon of heavyweight. Like, these two, I think, are absolute. There's a lot on the line for the both of them, I feel like, and I think Jailton Almeida is the one who's got the hype around him, and deservedly so. And then hopefully these two just put on a banger, to be honest. But,
it's a big fight at heavyweight, that's for sure. And at the top right now, it's very unclear with how long John Jones is going to be out. We have Tom Aspinall as the interim champion. I could definitely see the winner of this fight fighting Tom Aspinall for the interim title. And both guys, in terms of Almeida and Blaydes, they definitely deserve it. It's mind-boggling to me that Curtis Blaydes has never fought for a title in the UFC after all the different win streaks that he's gone on. And then for Jailton Almeida, like you said, he's got so much hype behind him. I think a fight between him and Aspinall will be a crazy thing for the next generation of heavyweights. But before that, I mean, we just have this fight, and both of these guys are so good on the ground. You have to wonder how that's going to factor into this fight. Maybe this will be another stand-up brawl. Who knows? But I think all these fights are super fun. And then the other one that I agree with you with Munoz and Phillips too being so under the radar. I think that's a fun stylistic matchup because Munoz has that great boxing style with the good leg kicks, and Kyler has such a flowy type of style to him. I mean, he trains in Arizona with that whole O'Malley camp, so he kind of has like a similar style to the bantamweight champion. And I think that could be really interesting to go up against a guy who's really like gritty like Pedro Munoz is. But then, like, Gamrot and RDA, man, like, what?
Yeah.
That's
Pedro
crazy.
Munoz and RDA, there's two guys that fight anyone, like, anywhere pretty much. Like, because these are two, obviously, like, serious up-and-coming contenders that they're both taking on. But at this point in their careers, like, they're all for it, and it's pretty awesome to see. So
yeah, I just can't wait for this card. It's going to be so insane. I know that Miami vibe is going to be just nuts for that main card especially. But we got to go back in time a little bit to last weekend, to the UFC Apex, which definitely is not as energetic as the 305 is. But there were some interesting fights on this one, and I guess we'll just hop right into the main event to start it off. Jairzinho Rozenstruik had a pretty interesting fight with Shamil Gaziev, handed Gaziev his first loss in MMA, TKO. Mark Goddard kind of had to stop it between rounds 4 and 5 because Gaziev was just basically done. Yeah. And I don't know about you, I didn't really think that this was such a great performance from Rozenstruik. I think it was more so just, he had a good jab, but that was really it. Like, in the beginning of the fight, he was kind of getting walked down, and I mentioned when I was talking about the O'Malley fight how O'Malley should try and circle. Rozenstruik a lot of the time was just moving backwards, and I think if he was going against someone who's a little more skilled or experienced, that wouldn't have worked as well as it did, because the jab was fantastic, and I think that's what won him the fight, because he busted up Gaziev's face, his nose. I think he was talking about his eye after the fight too, and especially when your nose is busted up, that messes with your breathing, which in turn messes with your cardio, and Gaziev obviously is his first UFC main event, 5 rounds. I don't know, I wasn't really wowed like some people were. I think Rozenstruik needed the win, but I think it definitely could have been a little bit better than it was, and I think he kind of got bailed out in this fight by a lesser opponent.
Yeah, Gaziev blew his gas tank in that first round, looking for the finish, and that obviously did not play well in his favor at all. It's not, because there was obviously a lot of openings like just throughout the whole fight, not even to talk about the first round, to keep Rozenstruik in a precarious position, and then obviously be able to win in the end. But like, the thing is also is like, it's a 5-round fight between heavyweights, and it's like, at this point it's like, if it's not for a title, then do we really need 5-round fights between heavyweights? Like, I personally don't think so. So, in this fight, like, at least for Rozenstruik, I think that that experience and whatnot, like, he's always packed a super powerful punch, but he didn't really need to unleash it here. Like, he just kept flicking the jab and short circling and whatnot, and that was enough pretty much. Like, Gaziev had his mouth open and whatnot. Like, you could just clearly see, like, it's almost like Mark Goddard, like, just mercifully just called the fight off, and that was that. So
he looked like he didn't want to be in there after round 4, and like I said, I think that's more of his own fault than it is Rozenstruik, because Rozenstruik's jab was amazing, but that was really it. And I think if Gaziev would have made any adjustment, it could have gone a little differently, but instead he just kept plodding forward, not changing the game plan whatsoever. And when you're just walking into punches and you're getting punched straight in the nose over and over, that's obviously going to impact your cardio. I thought it was more so just a terrible performance from Gaziev, more so than it was a good performance from Jairzinho. But I do like Piggy Boy. I know some fans don't really love that he has as many main events as he does, but I think he's a fun fighter to watch, and I'm glad that he finally did get a win. It was his first since, like I said, December of 2022. Maintains his ranking. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight the winner of Tuivasa versus Tybura in a couple weeks. Well, like, that fight is happening in a couple weeks. Maybe after that, I think that would be an interesting matchup, because he hasn't fought either of them yet. But to move on a little bit, we're not going to spend too much time on the co-main. Vitor Petrino beat Tyson Pedro by decision. Just really good kicks and good use of the jab. Tyson Pedro, he's always been like super elusive, but in this fight he just really seemed to step behind, and that's really all you could say with this one. I mean, it just seemed like Petrino's being a little bit quicker and just having a little more power just kind of stifled that movement a little bit. But obviously Tyson Pedro retired after the fight. He's given us a lot of really fun fights, and I think it's inspiring to see someone like him who, if you remember, in 2018, he took like a huge break, was out for like 3.5 years, and then came back in 2022 and, got a couple of good fights in after that. So I think that, he might not be the greatest fighter that we've ever seen, but I do think it's worth noting that he retired, and he gave us some fun fights definitely in the UFC. So
yeah, that respect.
Exactly, respect to him. But let's move on to these other fights, because honestly, a lot of them have like some title implications, even more so than the main event. So we're talking about flyweight next. We got Mokaev versus Alex Perez, and this fight, to put it bluntly, was kind of a snoozer at times. And we know that Mokaev's wrestling is elite. We have known that. In this fight, he just didn't seem to be able to do a lot with it. And he was calling for the title after that. I don't know if you can give a guy a title fight after a win that was kind of like a lull, honestly, with that one. I know he was talking a little bit about Brandon Royval too, and maybe we could see a number one contender fight between them, because flyweight kind of seems like it's just been the same revolving door in like the top 3 to 4. So maybe putting Mokaev in there against a guy like Royval or maybe Moreno could be an interesting move for the UFC. But I don't know. Where are you right now in Muhammad Mokaev?
I think I think Mokaev is a guy that we've seen been ascending for a little while now, and so to now get to a point where he can call out for the title, like that's encouraging and all that, but you definitely obviously want to see it in a fight that he looks way more dominant in. I feel like, because I feel like. And this obviously isn't to say that he lost the fight and then Perez got robbed, but like I think it's hard. I think you'd be hard pressed to score all 3 rounds for Muhammad Mokaev. I think round 2 was where things got pretty dicey, and then obviously going into the third, things just reverted back to how they were going in the first round. But I thought the wrestling, obviously, that's no question about that. Like, this guy can hang with anybody there, but you definitely want to see the striking a little more polished and whatnot, especially if we're talking about Pantoja that we're going to be across from. So like that's pretty much all I'm really saying. I thought maybe a more dominant showing, and I'd definitely be warmer to him getting a title shot very soon, but I think right now, like, we're definitely still in that I guess, like, limbo kind of stage.
Yeah, I didn't think he did enough. Like, I don't mean enough to win, but I mean like enough to get a title shot off of it. Yeah. It just, like you said, I know people, even Perez, like he did pretty well in that fight, honestly, and I don't think we learned much about Mokaev. We already knew he was an elite wrestler, and he dominated Perez really kind of in the clinch and on top. Perez was just kind of neutralized, but Mokaev wasn't really doing much with those positions. So I guess we'll see what happens with them. But to move on to bantamweight now, another really interesting rising prospect, Umar Nurmagomedov. He overcame just a crazy early knockdown to beat his opponent by crazy unanimous decision, 2 30-26s and a 30-25. What do you think of Umar's win?
So for Umar, like, this is definitely like the kind of win that you want to see from this guy. Coming back and all that. Against I would say against a worthy opponent too. Like, because now we're talking about the guy, being right back in the saddle and then getting a fight against like a top 5 guy in the division. But the thing is, it is the bantamweight division, and this obviously has a bunch of guys that have either already fought for the title and then are obviously like not that far away from getting right back to that opportunity, or who are already at that opportunity and shouldn't have to fight a guy like Umar Nurmagomedov and then put their ranking on the line against, obviously someone as dangerous as him. But
that's probably what's going to happen, though, too. I mean, you talk about those guys who are basically at where they need to be for a title shot. Umar called out Corey Sandhagen, who I think deserves to fight for a title, but I don't think he deserves it before a guy like Merab. So I feel like he's going to have to take another fight, and this fight with Umar just makes sense. And it was already booked, too, if you remember, a while back. I forget what happened that caused that fight not to happen. But I think that this is a good win for Umar. It's just good to see him back in there. He's such a good prospect, and not a lot of people want to fight him, man. But I think if he just keeps getting wins and he keeps showing people how good he is, you're not going to be able to prevent him from getting these opportunities for much longer. And I think that we've kind of gotten to that point.
I think what this leads me to, though, now is, say that Sandhagen fight does happen. Like, I think it's weird. Like, I don't want to say like Corey said, but I feel like Umar is going to be the one with more to gain and the one that has to win that fight, because I think, obviously him being the one calling for the fight and all that, like that tells me like, hey, you're ready like pretty much to fight for the title now. So what I take from that is, if he doesn't win that fight, then he's, obviously already as it is, like not many guys want to fight him. He's in a spot where he could be waiting like a little while for, obviously having to wait for the dust at the top of the division to settle, and then obviously see who his next opponent's going to be to try and get back into someone in that top 5. So that obviously creates like a lot of pressure on this guy, whereas obviously Corey Sandhagen's been here for a long time now, and there's no secret that he's one of the best fighters in the entire UFC, let alone bantamweight. So that creates that interesting thing to me. Thought this fight in particular, like I think a guy like Umar just moves like super well for a bantamweight, to the point where it's like that alone could be overwhelming for a lot of guys. Like if he's able to just, because there's no secret that these Dagestanis, these Nurmagomedovs, like they've got a gas tank that goes for days. They don't get tired, and like for me, that just creates something so interesting. I feel like if it ever got to a point where Umar was at at a point where he's like, you never want to see a guy get relegated to like a gatekeeper kind of status, or someone that can't get booked a fight because no one wants to put their number on the line against them, which is something like kind of what's happening right now. But I feel like he would be someone, especially obviously for the division that's looking for it, like a guy like him in flyweight, who would, I think, would be able to get a fight pretty easily there, and bring even more electricity to that division. I think that would be super fun. I don't think that would take very long for him at all to be able to get a title shot there.
I don't think he goes down to 125. That's such a tough cut, for anyone, really. True. Even like the smaller guys.
That's like the thing. It's like, because you obviously want to see that division just bring more and more, just have more and more contenders, but yeah, that's a really hard division to make weight in. So.
I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I do think he's good for now at 35, especially because I do think Sandhagen will take that fight. Corey's another guy who really, he deserves the title shot, but he also doesn't care. He believes he's the best in the world, and I think when you really do believe that you're the best, you're not afraid to fight anybody. And he obviously has signed the dotted line to fight Umar before. I think we'll see that again. I love the matchup because I think it'll determine the next top contender after Merab, because we have O'Malley versus Vera. Merab should be next, probably will be next against either of those guys. And I think that the timeline just kind of works out for Umar to fight Corey, and, we'll see what happens there. There's a lot to happen at the top of 135, and this past weekend and after next weekend, it's going to be kind of crazy. But besides that, I mean, it was a pretty fun card in general. The only other crazy highlight that I really wanted to mention on the main card, obviously, was Steven Erceg versus Matt Schnell. That knockout was just insane. You were talking about flyweight prospects. I think Erceg is a guy who we could see at the top of 125.
That was definitely awesome to see. Definitely super in line with what we're used to seeing from flyweight. So,
and Erceg himself, this was just really a typical Erceg win. He's a great striker. He's got awesome timing, good boxing. That left hook was obviously money, and it was a fun way to start off that main card. But even the prelims were fun. Obviously the energy could be a little better at the Apex. It's just tough when there's not that many fans there. But, next week we got UFC 299 in Miami. So I think that the energy will be there, of course. And even besides that, we got Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou, which is going to be crazy. So THH episode 63 next week. Seems like we're going to have a whole lot to talk about. And we hope you guys will join us. So see you all.